Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your Pauper commentators, Michael Pejic and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Mike, I will give you the answer I give you every week, and that is it is good. How are you?
It's good. I took a week off, so I'm back. I'm feeling refreshed.
Yeah, we miss you. People were demanding the episode, Mike. I had to fend them off.
I thank you for your valiant efforts. I really do. It means a lot to me. Do you want to take care of upkeep stuff so we can get into our topic for today?
Let's do it. Untap, Upkeep, Patreon. We have a Patreon. For just $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including the pre and post shows where we discuss things other than Magic, and you get access to our patron exclusive Discord channel. We got a lot of folks in there. It's a really, really great time.
Yeah, it's always a good enjoyable time.
And it's like the Powerpuff Girl phone that the mayor has, where you pick it up and you dial the Powerpuff Girls, except the Powerpuff Girls are me and Mike.
There you go. There's a wonderful little 90s reference for you. We are also brought to you in part by Hipsters of the Coast. Every week our episodes go up there. They have all sorts of Magic the Gathering content for a variety of formats. Go over there, check out some articles, listen to some podcasts, show them some love on social media. Really solid stuff. All right. That's our upkeep. Let's talk about one news item before we get in to
draw.
Yeah, the draw step. Like we're not quite in the main phase yet. This is the point where our opponent can like click us and feel like big brain 3000 IQ about it. But starting this week on Thursday is the premiere of I used the wrong word there. The premiere of the Pauper Premier League. So this is an event similar to the Vintage Super League that is being sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. and a bunch of friends of the show are going to be on it. Are you going to be tuning in on Thursday?
Of course.
Yeah. So basically what this is a bunch of community members as well as sort of general Magic influencers. I think that's the best way to refer to them. We've got all sorts of names who have even been on this show. And
no spoilers.
The list is out there. They've published information about it.
Oh, yeah,
so just to hop over here, we have Alex Ullman, longtime friend of the show. We have Kendra, the Maverick gal, or the Maverick girl. They've got Twitter handles here, so I'm gonna get thrown. We have Evan Irwin, who is one of the hosts of Magic Mics. We have this is strange. Joseph Harani, who most people most likely better know as 420 Dragon. He's going to be there repping the familiars, no doubt. Chris Van Meter, one of the big names behind the social media presence for Card Kingdom. We've got Brian Koval, the current reigning vintage champ. We've got Ricardo, who is a Brazilian player. We have Adam Yurchik, Brian DeMars, who's written on the format on a semi-regular basis. Emma Partlow, who is one of our fellow co-workers over at Hipsters of the Coast. Andreas Peterson, big-time player, and Michael Bondi, also a Magic pro.
Both of them have also been in the Vintage Super League. I want to point that out. So they are very accomplished players who also just happen to love Pauper. And honestly, isn't Pauper the closest format to Vintage anyway? Let's be real.
I mean, we don't have Gush anymore, so we don't have Gush, we don't have Days, we don't have Gitaxian Probe. I guess we can still bond over Preordain and Ponder. I do also want to mention Brian Koval is also a Vintage Super League alumnus.
Thank you.
But yeah, so there's going to be events from July 11th to August 15th, the sort of Swiss portion of it. And it'll be streamed, and you'll be able to watch all these matches. You'll be able to get commentary from other players who will be playing that night. And as I read here from the article, players with a 4-2 record will face each other and then face off against any players with a 5-1 record. 6-0 record is automatic bye to the finals. So yeah, this is a very exciting sort of high profile event. It's going to be running from the six events we've got here for the Swiss portion are July 11th through the 15th of August. So tune on in, and we'll include a link to the announcement of this so that you can get all that juicy information. But definitely go out and support this. Be in the chat. Talk to people about this, spread the word, blah, blah, blah. The usual good promotional stuff that we know and love. Anything else on the Premier League?
It sounds really exciting.
Yeah. I mean,
a small part of me wishes we were in it, but
we got time and commitments.
Yeah, we're busy. We're very busy people.
we are. And yeah, definitely I will try to make as many of these as possible. So I'll be hanging out in the chat like some sort of terrible ogre and contributing my feedback on it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the Vintage Super League sort of format, and
it's really cool.
They've spun it off to a bunch of different formats now, but I do really like the sort of two players commentating on another two players who are at a similar levels match. It feels really insightful. It's nice to watch players sort of interact in this way. And I've generally found, like, I don't know anything about Vintage, but hearing two people who do know about Vintage talk through a game of Vintage is good entertainment. So I'm very excited for this. I'm hoping that it does well, and can't wait to be in attendance. All right, we gotta
finish the primer.
Yep, the re-primer, the second coat of primer, the additional coverage. We're yelling about combo tonight. The decks that I understand the least and get the most frustrated about.
So first step.
Yeah, what do we have? Tribe, yeah. So
is Tribe still a thing?
Tribe it had some level of success when we wrote out this outline almost a month ago now. It's definitely diminished in terms of how much it's showing up, especially in recent weeks. We're probably going to talk next week about some of the changes. But Tribe a couple weeks ago did actually exist. It's pretty much on the out and out now, but I felt we should cover it still, just because it was it was a really big force in the format for a long time.
So there's a card called Tireless Tribe. Tireless Tribe is W for a 1/1, and it has an ability that you can discard a card to it in order to give it +0/+4. Did I get that right?
Yes, I believe you did.
So what you would do is +0/+4. So there's also a card called Inside Out, where a creature deals power equal to its its power and toughness are switched. Mm-hmm. It does not deal damage equal to its toughness. And you draw a card. So the goal of the deck used to be to draw a ton of cards, make sure the coast was clear with like a taxi and this was a while back, and then use cards like Gush, Brainstorm, etc. to stock your hand in order to deliver a lethal kill, usually assisted by some sort of evasion card like Shadow Rift or something like that. It was very consistent. It played Augur Bolus. It was great. Now bans have happened.
Yeah. So the big two losses are the two that you mentioned. Like Gush in this deck in particular represented 4 cards in hand by nature of drawing you 2 cards and also bouncing the 2 islands. So it represented a 16-point power swing. And I think this was arguably the deck that benefited the most from all aspects of Gush. Like
it was. I don't think it was ever the best deck, but it was the deck that used Gush the best.
Yeah, it managed to capitalize on literally every line of text in that card, because like the Delver decks, even, you were sometimes getting that sweet foil value, but outside of that, like it wasn't completely utilizing every aspect of that card. Tribe was just like, oh yeah, cool, like 4 more cards in my hand, great, like this is exactly what I want to do. And this, for a long time, this was sort of built as sort of a turbo Xerox deck where it was all card draw. It was just a pile of card draw.
And then it went kind of through a punk emo phase where it became a mid-range deck.
Yeah. We started seeing like Seeker of the Way slip in there, Augur of Bolus to sort of represent a little bit more card draw and also rebuff some of the more aggressive decks in the format. But yeah, this was a deck that had a very long-term amount of success and has now kind of bit the bullet a bit with the bannings. It did try and hang on there. Like, you know, I'm looking here, I'm seeing some pretty consistent finishes at the beginning of June, but it's kind of petered out. And
So
I wouldn't surprise me if someone figures out how to do this again.
combo is a strange beast in Pauper. We have like all this fast mana, but like kind of, I mean, all this quote unquote. We have Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual,
Some of the red rituals as well.
yeah, et cetera, but we have nothing to do with it. Is the problem?
Yeah, we don't have any of the storm payloads, so
Right.
you can't just go
is
storm. And yeah, like all the combo decks in Pauper are just kind of bizarre, and I don't think this is any exception to that rule.
Right, and this is a great example of that.
Yeah,
It doesn't look like you actually have one of the more off the wall decks on here.
we can dig into them once we've gotten through the more traditional options.
Right. Up next is the precursor to Tribe, which is it Blitz? Very, very, very similar, except it relied on creatures like Kiln Fiend and Niv-Mizzet Cyclops to deliver the kill instead of Tireless Tribe. It just turns out that Tireless Tribe was just more efficient.
Yeah, so this was more sort of, in comparison, kind of a go wide, if you will. Like it would play slightly more creatures, and it over the years, like sometimes it's been playing Delver, sometimes it hasn't. But the goal here is both Kiln Fiend and Niv-Mizzet Cyclops get +3/+0 whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. So the goal here is, you know, play a bunch of Phyrexian mana spells, play a bunch of cheap 1-drops that cycle, and just pump one of these things up to lethal. And I think the real turning point for this deck was the printing of Temur Battle Rage, a card that I still think is absurd was printed at common. Which is 1 in red for an instant. Target creature gets double strike until end of turn, which seems cool, but it also has another ability, Ferocious. That creature also gains trample if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. And fun fact, most of the creatures in this deck, after you cast Temur Battle Rage, have 4 or more power. It's a real doozy of a deck. And this is another deck that was hit hard by the removal of free spells out of the format. And again, not seeing great results in the past couple of weeks with it, but we do kind of want to. This is definitely going to be the most sort of out there episode in terms of viability in the current metagame, but we still feel these are kind of important to cover.
Yeah. And then let's get to the Cadillac combo deck, the one that's really a thing.
The one that has stood the test of time. This was a deck when I started playing. It is a deck people are playing today. It's Elves.
Can we say the same about some of these other decks looking back?
I mean, a bunch of these have come in and out of the metagame, but Elves is, you know, still sitting here. The Goldfish estimate is 5% of the metagame, and it does what it does. This is a tribal combo deck. It has seen many revisions over the years in slight little ways. It got a huge boost around the release of Eternal Masters with a key downshift in the form of Elvish Vanguard. But what's the game plan here? What is this deck trying to do?
This deck is trying to puke up a ton of elves, mostly fast mana, Virtual Rangers, Elvish Mystic, Findhorn Elves, Land of War Elves. And so, unlike in Legacy, or even Modern, in Legacy, there's no, what's that card called? Back to Nature?
Nature's Lore? No.
Wow, we are bad. It is neither of those cards, and I cannot think of the name.
Yeah, God, it's 2 green
No, it's G. It costs just G. It is.
It very much doesn't. Natural.
It is Glimpse of Nature.
Oh, Glimpse of Nature. Oh,
It is Glimpse of Nature. Sorry, I'm so sorry for that.
you're
listeners.
thinking of the other
I
combo
totally
card
blanked.
for this in Legacy.
Oh, yeah, you're thinking of Natural Order. So
Okay.
in Legacy, what you want to do is you want to play Glimpse of Nature, play a bunch of elves, draw a ton of cards, Natural Order to create a hope with him, and swing for lethal. In Pauper, you can't quite do that, but there are still creatures that help you do something similar. So you want to play out all these elves, then you want to play a card like Lead the Stampede, Winding Way, or Distant Melody in order to find a card like Elvish Vanguard, Timberwatch Elf, Lissalana Huntmaster, and just add a ton of value to the board. We still have access to cards like Priest of Titania to generate tons and tons of mana, Well-Wisher to gain life. Like it's crazy. The synergy in this deck is crazy.
Yeah, you've got Lissalana Huntmaster as a way to get more token elves on the board, and then you have Timberwatch Elf, which is kind of the deck's finisher if you can't just go wide enough. So Timberwatch Elf is 2 and a green for a 1/2. Tap, target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of elves on the battlefield.
Important in the mirror.
Very important in the mirror. Although, to be fair, I've rarely seen a non-lethal activation of Timberwatch, but so the real sort of thing about this deck is it gets to cheat on mana in a lot of ways. Like we have Birchlore Rangers, which has the activated ability tap 2 untapped elves you control, add a mana of any color to your mana pool. Note, those don't have to be those can have summoning sickness, and notably the deck plays 4 copies of Nettle Sentinel, which doesn't untap, but when you when you cast a green spell, it untaps. So if you have 2 of those, you can just keep
Kyrian Ranger.
Yeah, you got Kyrian Ranger. Like this is a fun. It is the Cadillac of combo decks, isn't it? Like it's got all the features you could want, and it's never really suffered a ban. I think that's one of the interesting things, because there is definitely a history. If you look at the Pauper ban list, most of it is combo cards. And
it's true. He's right.
Elves has never really had anything banned out of it because it is, I think, at the end of the day, fundamentally a fair deck.
Well, it gets blown out by like trickery.
Yeah, like
it's easy to disrupt because it's a creature-based combo deck.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, in a way that Tribe was not super easy to interact with, I guess, because of Gesh.
Yeah, like it has never felt, in my opinion, like Elves was just clearly far and away the best deck, or that Elves was ever an unbeatable deck, quote unquote. And it gets to do a bunch of cool stuff. Like the Viridian Longbow line was one of the big things where the first time I saw that, I was just like, oh my God, what is this? So Viridian Longbow is an equipment that costs 1, equips for 3, and turns your creature into a pinger. And so what you can do is you can slap this on, say, a Nettle Sentinel on your combo turn and just keep pinging your opponent every time you cast a green spell. There's a bunch of really cool and intricate lines. If you are curious about this deck, please go and watch Kendra Smith, the Maverick Girl. She streams on a pretty reasonable basis. She's a huge Elves fan and has honed this deck to a razor point over years and years of playing it. So is this sort of the de facto, like, if someone comes to you and they're like, I like playing combo, what should I play in Pauper? Is this the go-to?
Yeah, I would say this. I think that this is one of the most consistent combo decks in the format, and it also is an aggro deck when you need it to be, so it's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's not really like the Storm combo deck, but it puts in work. Like there's nothing, not much more I can say about it. Like it works. Everything in this deck is good in the context of specifically this deck. But yeah, again, like this does have some weak matchups. If we ever see a return to prominence of things like Crypt Rats or even Car's Justice, this deck does not have a good time against either of those. Sort of has this natural foil in the metagame right now of Pestilence. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different creatures, most of which are 3 to 4 copies of each, that die to a single activation of Pestilence in this deck. I don't know. It has its rough matchups, but I do legitimately think this is the most consistent combo deck that this format has ever had.
Yep, I am inclined to agree.
All right, so rounding out sort of the big players, we made a quick reference to this earlier. It's familiars.
And this deck used to be objectively the best deck in the format. It
Yes.
hasn't been for a long time. Notably, Cloud of Fairies.
Yep.
And to an extent, Drake
I mean,
were
so
banned to nerf this deck. And it's a lot less good than it used to be. But in the capable hands of 420 Dragon, catch him on the Pauper Premier League, the deck has made kind of a resurgence.
yeah, and it is a weird deck and always has been. So back in the day, this played Cloud of Fairies, which would untap your lands. You played a bunch of the Karus, the lands that tap for 2 mana, and you'd play Ghostly Flicker. And then in order to break mana parity, you'd play Sunscape Familiar, which is 1 and a white for an 0/3 with Defender. Green and blue spells you play cost 1 less to cast. So you basically would go infinite on mana, and then the kill condition varied over the years, but you found a way to kill your opponent. And the deck has evolved quite a lot since then, because it has had, as you mentioned, 2 options for the land untapping mechanic banned out from underneath it. And its current iteration is... Man, just looking at this, it's still really bizarre to me. So your goal here is to establish a Ghostly Flicker loop where you are flickering a mnemonic wall and either another mnemonic wall or stuff to draw cards, or maybe Stonehorn Dignitary to make them skip all their combat steps. And the goal here is you can either slowly sort of grind them out by flickering 2 mnemonic walls, getting back the Ghostly Flicker and getting back a burn spell, or casting a Sage's Row Denizen, which is 2 and a blue for a 2/3. It says whenever another blue creature enters a battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So you can kind of mill them out with all the ETB triggers. What do you think of this deck in the modern era?
I think it's a lot worse than it used to be, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, that deck was a little too strong, but I like that it's seen so much success in the hand of a specialist.
Yeah, and this I do think, as much as I like sort of hate this argument, I do really think that this is one of those decks where in order to do well with it, you have to be talented at Magic Online. I think like
you have to be actually good at playing the program Magic Online.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing to say, but the infinite loop is not shortcuttable on Magic Online, and at the end of the day, I do honestly think that is one of the things that has held this deck back from taking up as much of a metagame percentage as it could. I've long held that like this deck could be taking up a larger metagame share. It's just such a pain to play.
And we've said that about a couple of other decks before too. For example, Tortured Existence.
Yeah. Just the click intensive decks where you're really fighting against that chess clock more than you are your opponent.
Yeah, because you can't demonstrate infinite loops on Moto, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason that this deck actually plays Sage's Row Denizen to begin with. Like, it's just a slightly quicker way to kill people on Magic Online than, flickering 2 mnemonic walls and targeting your opponent with compulsive research until they draw their library. And I never remember how this works, but there is an infinite loop with Snap. The 1 and a blue, return target creature to its owner's hand, untap up to 2 lands. I can never remember exactly how this combo works, but you can use it for infinite ETB triggers. Also, notably, I think, is it fair to say that the big thing that sort of put this back on the map was the printing of God Pharaoh's Faithful?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't think I know enough about the deck, but I think that, I think God Fears, I think you can point to that because that's when Joseph 420 Dragon started really brewing with the deck a lot more, and he's had more success with the deck than anyone, and so I think that maybe pushed it over the edge.
For folks unfamiliar, this is a single white mana for an 0/4. Whenever you cast a blue, black, or red spell, you gain 1 life. So I think when we first sort of saw this coming up as something that was showing up in this combo deck specifically, it is kind of a confluence, as with a lot of the weirder cards that see play in Pauper. It's a confluence of a bunch of things going right, but none of them being immediately super great. Like, it's an 0/4, so it survives Bolt. And whenever you cast a blue, black, or red spell, you gain 1 life. So it lets you sort of buffer your life total over the course of the early game. It also serves as a reasonable blocker. Like, it's hard to get this out of the way in non-black decks without kind of having to 2-for-1 yourself, or at least tie up an attacker and use a burn spell. It just kind of sits at that just right point.
When the sun hits the hill just right.
Just right. Yeah, so again, I don't want to butcher how this deck works. Just tune into the Pauper Premier League. 420 Dragon will be running this, I am sure. Is the deck he is most well known for, and you will get a better explanation from people out of there, because frankly, this deck makes my brain hurt. All right.
And then rounding out the main cast, and then we'll get into the weird ones, we've got Reanimator. So put fatties into the graveyard, bring them back with Exhume, and now actually the white spells too, now that they're in the format, Breath of Life and Resurrection, and go to town. Usually this is done with Ulamog's Crusher, as well as Dragon's Breath, which gives a creature haste when it enters the battlefield. So, with Exhume specifically, you can go turn 1, Faithless Looting, discard Ulamog's Crusher and Dragon's Breath. Turn 2, Exhume, bring it back out, and then attack your opponent for 8 and make them sacrifice 2 of their permanents. That's like the nut draw for this deck.
Yeah, that is the absolute, like, so this can be a deck where the last action your opponent will ever take is deciding whether they should scoop or put 2 lands into their graveyard. Like,
yeah, it's pretty sweet. Little soft to counter spells.
Mm-hmm.
But, what isn't?
But I mean, this is one of those decks where it hits hard enough. It can hit hard enough in the early game where you're kind of willing to take that risk. I think, honestly, not too dissimilar to Legacy Reanimator, where like a Force of Will can blow you out, but you can also blow people out by swinging with a massive 7/7 on turn 2 with lifelink. And while we're not using the exact same payload here, 8/8 with Annihilate 2 is still gonna put in that work. And there was for a while like a blue sort of more mid-rangey version of this deck, but that sort of fell off pretty quickly.
Yeah, with like Striped River Winder and such.
Yeah, it played some other things, but yeah, like this really is like and obviously we don't have Force of Will, but like this is kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, this is a force check deck. Like in Legacy, you talk about like these combo decks that if the opponent doesn't have Force of Will, you can just kill your opponent on turn 1. If they have Force of Will, you're gonna have a bad time, and that's it. Like that's the depth of sort of most matchup analyses. But here, we're free from the odds of someone having a Hate Bear from like Death and Taxes. We do have a free counterspell in the format, but it is foil. Not a lot of people are running that in the post-Gush era. So yeah, it's just kind of a deck. It's never seen great success, but it has always sort of been around. The allure is there, right?
Right. And then the weird ones.
All right, which weird combo decks that we haven't written down in advance do you want to talk about?
Well, people will get mad if I don't at least say the word Vinestorm.
Yeah, so this one died a pretty ugly death.
Think can win anymore without Gush.
So it does have Fathom Seer, the creature version of Gush.
This is the deck where I don't remember how it works. Okay, I'll just say them.
So the goal with Vinestorm was one of the few cards with Storm we still have left is Vinestorm, which is a rampant growth to hand.
It's called Sprouting Vines.
Sprouting Vines. Sorry, my mistake. But it's a Storm card where for each copy of it tutors a land to hand. So the goal here is you build up Storm count, you get a ton of lands in your hand, and you use a card called Inner Fire, which is 3 and a red for a sorcery. Add red to your mana pool for each card in your hand. And the goal is just to get to a lethal Carevex Torch and burn your opponent out. Definitely very, very much so hampered by the fact that we no longer have access to Gush in the format. But,
all right, Mike. All right, enough. One Land Spy.
All right, One Land Spy. We covered this as like in the first 10 episodes of our show, and I said it then. I didn't understand how it works, and I'm going to say it again today. I kind of understand how it works because I've seen Legacy Belcher go off, and I kind of get it. So, One Land Spy is named after the fact that it obviously has a single land. Well, Mike, how does that deck win? So, you're going to play 4 copies of Land Grant, so you have a virtual 5 lands. You're then also going to play a bunch of free mana, or at least cheaty mana. So we're talking Cabal Rituals, Dark Rituals, we're talking
Lotus Petals.
We're talking Wild Cantor, which even though it's mana neutral, you still play because you want to be able to cash it in. We're talking Tinderwall. We're talking some versions run Songs of the Damned. There are a lot of options here. As you mentioned, we have a lot of cheap to free mana. So the goal here is you want to turn your entire library upside down directly into your graveyard with a little card called Balustrade Spy, which is 3 and a black for a 2/3 with flying. You don't care about any of that. You care about the fact that when it enters the battlefield, target player reveals cards in the top of their library until they reveal a land card and puts those cards in their graveyard. Now, you, as the brilliant combo player, have chosen to include a single land. So if that land's not in your deck, this action just puts the whole deck in the graveyard. From there,
Brilliant.
From there, the easiest kill in the deck is Haunting Misery, which is just 1 black, remove X creatures from your graveyard from the game, and deal X damage to target player. So most of these decks are running, somewhere in the mid to high 20s, sometimes even cresting over 30 creatures. If you flip all these into your graveyard, you can hopefully just dome your opponent out. The other options are way more convoluted loops that I really don't fully quite understand, involving such
Mike,
hits.
It sounds like you understand how this deck works pretty well.
So I understand the flip over Haunting Misery, you're dead now. I don't understand the Conjurer's Bauble lines, and I certainly don't understand how Grey Merchant of Asphodel in the sideboard manages to win. I know it can. I don't remember how it works. Because you'll see in sideboards, you'll see Blood Celebrant, Cavern Harpy, and Grey Merchant, which somehow goes close enough to infinite to kill your opponent. There's a lot going on in this deck. Is this the only Pauper deck that can conceivably win on turn 1?
I guess so. No. I mean, actually, yes. I think that you could maybe win with Reanimator on turn 1 if you're very lucky.
But I think even with that deck, you don't actually kill your opponent. You don't take your opponent to 0. Right. You just make them realize that life is futile and they should just move on to the next game.
Correct.
I think this is the only Pauper deck that can legitimately turn 1 reduce your opponent's life total directly to 0. But yeah, this is one of those decks which has been the bane of my existence because I don't fully understand how it works. I just know that it does work rarely. This is the epitome of I don't want to deride this too much, but this is kind of our format's meme deck. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's very fair.
It can kill you on turn 1, but it can also just sit there and do nothing. This is not a deck I would recommend until you've really run out of things you want to do in Pauper and you decide, hey, let's try One Land Spy. Let's just take it out for a ride. Let's just try and figure out how this terrifying machine actually functions. And when you do that, good on you. So what decks doesn't this deck want to see?
Any of them? Itself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like that is a fair point. Like, this is a deck that sometimes just loses to mulliganing. Like, it does just sort of sacrifice a certain percentage of its games to just like, cool, didn't draw the pieces I needed. We're done.
Guess I just lose.
Yeah, guess I die now. But also like counter spells. Like, there's a lot of points at which you can interrupt any part of this combo. Like, if your opponent only has the one balustrade spy and you counter that, like, it's going to set them back a decent amount. It is a thing. Again, I don't fully understand how on earth this deck actually wins. I've tried to understand it over and over again. Just understand it's similar to Belcher and Legacy. It's convoluted. It doesn't have the storm lines, but it's kind of trying to do the same thing. And yeah, that's our iconic meme combo deck of the format. Do we have any others we should talk about? Do we want to talk about the one that doesn't work right now on Magic Online?
Which one is that?
The Arcane Combo, aka Petal Festival.
Oh yeah, there's Wonder Walls and there's Petal Festival. But those are the other two.
Yeah, so Wonder Walls is a combo deck that seeks to use Freed from the Real to go infinite on mana and
Karavek's Torch.
Yeah, Karavek's Torch someone. Which, if I remember correctly, like I want to say like a year or so ago, put up like a first place finish at one of the Rags to Riches.
Yeah, and people liked it.
Yeah,
for a minute.
Yeah, there was definitely talk about it, but the Arcane deck is one of the ones that always interests me. And when we say this deck doesn't currently work, we're talking about Magic Online. So currently, for the past, like, I want to say year plus, we've had a bug that's been sitting in the Moto reported bug section that just says that if you splice a spell onto another spell and the spliced spell has a target and the spell it was spliced onto does not have a target, it won't work properly. And the reason that this matters is there is an absurd combo deck, which I've heard, I believe Petal Festival is the colloquial name. And what this is seeking...
Oh, Mike, you damn well know it is.
I've played this deck. It is an experience, if you will. So Petal Festival seeks to use a weird old mechanic called Splice onto Arcane. And you might be asking, if you're newer to the game, what does that mean? So Splice onto Arcane is an alternate cost where you can reveal a card with Splice onto Arcane from your hand and add its effects to an arcane spell that is on the stack or that is being cast. So the idea here is, if I have an arcane spell and I have two things in my hand with Splice onto Arcane, I can reveal it, and then that spell gets those other spells' effects tacked onto it. And the goal here is to use a card called Psychic Puppetry, which taps or untaps a permanent and costs a blue to splice onto an arcane spell. A bunch of land enchantments that make your lands tap for more mana, and to go infinite with this. And currently the issue is that Psychic Puppetry just doesn't work. And the way that you actually go infinite with this is there's a card called Petals of Insight, the eponymous Petals of the Festival, that costs 4 and a blue. It's a sorcery, arcane, so you can splice onto this bad boy. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order. You may put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order. If you do, return Petals of Insight to its owner's hand. Otherwise, draw 3 cards. So what you do is you cast Petals of Insight with a land that taps for, if I'm remembering everything correctly, I want to say it has to be 7 mana If you want to go infinite on your mana, I
have no idea. I'm just...
Oh, no. Okay. So if you want to go infinite on mana, you have to have a land that taps for 7 or more mana. Because what you do is you Petals of Insight, put the 3 cards to the bottom of your library, and splice a Psychic Puppetry onto it. So you cast a spell, you untap your land, you floated 7 mana, you paid 6 of it, you have 1 blue or 1 green floating. You repeat this until you have infinite mana. And then once you have infinite mana, you can just cast Petals of Insight over and over again, splicing a Dampen Thought, which mills your opponent for the top 4 cards of their library, and you do that until they have no cards left in their library. I'm actually getting lightheaded with the amount I'm talking, trying to explain
please,
this.
I have a family.
So yeah, this deck doesn't work on Magic Online. I played this deck at a couple of FNMs back to back. I did terribly with it. I think the deck is fine. You have a bad time against counterspell decks. You have a bad time against aggro decks. That's all I have to say about this. And I think like most of these combo decks are kind of in that realm. Like you're either bad against aggro decks, you're bad against counterspell decks, you're bad against both of them. But mid range, absolutely murder mid range, and even slow starts out of aggro decks. But I think we'll leave on Petal Festival. Are there any other weird combo decks that we're forgetting that people are going to get upset about?
I don't care anymore.
We've stared into the void too long. All right. So that was kind of the wrap up of our primer on the format, and we were aware that things have suddenly changed. We wanted to finish out this series. We're going to talk about the changes to the format soon. Promise you on that one.
Should we run through these M20 spoilers real fast?
Yeah. We've had a pretty long show so far, so yeah, we can get into this.
Yeah. I think we have time. There's only like 5 cards.
Yeah. So M20 core sets back again, and this one is pretty
bad.
It's not good for our format. There's cool stuff for other formats. There's some actually really cool stuff for other formats, but for our format, not that much.
Leading off, we have Cloudkin Seer, 2 and a blue, gets you a creature with flying that draws you a card and is also a 2/1.
Yep. It's a very small Muldrifter.
We think it's all right.
Yeah.
What I think is better is the next card. Do you want to read this one?
Winged Words. It is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Draw 2 cards. Now, Mike, you might be saying, that sounds an awful lot like Divination. Divination's not a card I've ever run in Pauper. Well, so Winged Words has the additional text that says, this spell costs 1 generic less to cast if you control a creature with flying.
Gush 2.0. Bam. You heard it here.
Just had to go there. So yeah, this turns out Blue's got some kind of relevant creatures with flying, and this card probably sits fine among them.
Yeah, I have a feeling people will just keep playing accumulated knowledge because it's an instant, but this card is fine.
Yeah. It's not quite as good as Thoughtcast, but it's shades of Thoughtcast, and Thoughtcast is a pretty good card.
Next up, we have Gorging Vulture, 2 and a black. It's you another creature with flying, a 2/2. When Gorging Vulture enters the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. You gain 1 life for each creature put into your graveyard this way. Mike and I were talking. We think this might be good in Tortured Existence.
Or at least reasonable. I don't think it's amazing, but it did catch my eye that it helps buff your life total and it puts cards in the graveyard. I think it's fine there. I don't think it's anything to write home about. Tortured Existence hasn't been putting up a whole ton of results anyway, but we thought it was worth at least mentioning. Next up, we have a strictly better card. This card is strictly better than another card in our format, but it's still a little on the edge. So this is Growth Cycle. It's 1 and green for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. And that kind of sounds like a bad giant growth, but it has more text on it. It gets an additional +2/+2 until end of turn for each card named Growth Cycle in your graveyard. So you were hesitant about this one. Tell me a little bit about why.
2 mana pump. I mean, it's fine.
So I think the first one...
It's good. It's good with 2. The first one's okay. The second one's good.
Yeah, and the third one is like, if you have more attackers than them, you're probably just murdering them.
Yes.
Like 2 mana +9 is, or +7/+7, sorry, is gonna get people dead pretty quickly.
Get her dead.
I think this card is reasonable. I don't think it has a home because Stompy's not doing really great right now, and also Stompy cares more about dealing damage quickly than it does waiting for the next copy of this card to show up. But worth bringing up. What's our last card we wanted to talk about out of this set?
Heart Piercer Bow. 2 mana gets you equipment artifact. Whenever a quick creature attacks, Heart Piercer Bow deals 1 damage to target creature defending player controls. Equip 1. So it's fine. It's not the greatest, but it's also not the worst. If it was tapped to 1 damage, though, oh my god. I guess it'd just be Viridian Longbow.
Well, it'd be Viridian Longbow with the cheaper equip cost. That would be quite the doozy in Elves. Just being able to kind of like...
Yeah, as is. Like, I don't really think this will see a lot of play, but it's more interesting than a lot of the other cards that we saw from the set.
Also, definitely a lot more interesting than our typical equipment that we see at Common.
Yeah,
because
and it's a downshift.
Yeah, it is. I was shocked when that news came out. I was like, wait a second, this wasn't already a common? But
it wasn't uncommon.
Yeah, it wasn't uncommon, bafflingly. It's part of like this weird cycle that they brought back of... There's this one creature, Renowned Weaponsmith, that tutors this and Vial of Dragonfire by name, and they reprinted all of these in a core set for some reason. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, M20 was a bit of a dud, and that's kind of why we're giving it this very sort of short treatment.
But didn't you have another piece of content you wanted to mention here, Mike?
Are we talking about next week?
No, I'm talking about this quote.
Oh no, we're saving that one for the patrons. It's exclusive content. It's good content.
Sorry. All right, sorry. I didn't know that.
So I do want to talk a little bit before we get to the outro about next week. Next week we're going to be talking about the unification of Pauper. Probably should have mentioned this a little bit earlier because it's been kind of a hot topic. The Pauper format got unified. It's a good thing. We're going to talk about
our conversation on it.
Well, yeah. Like I don't want to get into it too much here because if we're going to do a whole episode on it or at least half an episode on it, I do kind of want to give it the time it deserves, but is what it is. We're going to talk about that next week, so please don't worry. We will be getting to it. We understand it's very important, and it was a big surprise for all of us, so we will get to that. I promise you. All right. Got anything else for the folks, or are you ready to take us out of the show, Adrian?
I'll take us out. Thanks for joining us, everyone, today. This podcast is brought with the support of our patrons. Please consider supporting us if you like the show, including Fallen content creator in a new province. Shout out to you. I hope you're still listening. Check for this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you if you listen to this on platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS Pat's Games, Mike's LGS JP Comics, and of course, L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.